Good afternoon. My name is Thurman Greco, and I have a guest this afternoon, Michael Berg. And the name of our show is Take This Bread, and we are the weekly program of the Good Neighbor Food Pantry here in Woodstock, New York. And we are going to talk about all kinds of things this afternoon that are going to be very, very interesting to everyone because family is such a presence, not only in Woodstock but in other communities in the area. And I would like to start off by asking you, how did this all begin? Where was the seed, Michael Berg, that grew into family?
Well, family started in the late, variously in 69 or 70 as a result of the impact on the town of Woodstock of the Rock Festival that happened 115 miles away at Bethel. But after the festival bore the name of Woodstock. Woodstock was the place where Albert Grossman and Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and a lot of music was happening here. And so the town was inundated with young people and didn't really have an appropriate response. The only response they had was a police response. Young people were being arrested for sleeping on people's lawns and skinny dipping. There was a lot of psychedelic drug use, which the best response is probably not a police response. And so there was a community meeting called, whoever wanted to come. It was attended by church people, business people, street people. And at that meeting, a woman named Gail Varsi, a remarkable woman, said, well, if there's a problem in the town, call me, 679-2485. And she lived on Library Lane. And when she had to go out, she would call a friend and say, I got to go shopping, come answer the phone. Well, from those extremely rudimentary beginnings, we believe ourselves to be the second oldest emergency switchboard, continuously operating emergency switchboard in the country.
Wow.
And we've had somebody answering 679-2485 and about 9 other lines now, every day, 24 hours a day for over 40 years. It's
Wow.
an incredible commitment of a community to its people that no matter what time, no matter what issue, no matter what it is, you can call family and somebody will be there to listen to you. And that's really in its most essential form, the essence of what family is. It's a commitment to listen and try and help.
And it all started from this one woman that's
Well, there were a lot of people that stepped forward to make that a reality. There was a building given to it. In the early days, there were services that were available that we can't even provide now. There was a veterinary named Dr. Glenn Benjamin, and he offered to provide free veterinary services to any animals who would come in on Sunday. And so if you walked into the family on Sunday in the real early days, there'd be 10 or 12 dogs and cats lined up waiting for Dr. Benjamin. But in those days, there were no hip replacements, and so when Dr. Benjamin's hip gave out, the service gave out. And we had Dr. Steve Young. Recently, there was an article in the Woodstock Times about Dr. Steve Young. Well, Dr. Steve Young's office was the upstairs at Family, and he was giving free medical services. Well, you can't get free medical services these days, or it's very hard, very rare. So we've always sort of grown and thrived on the skills and the commitment and the energy of the people that come to us. And we live in a remarkable community.
You just addressed something that I think is very interesting, the lack of healthcare services. What is happening to people who have no health care nowadays?
Well, I don't want to get into the full parameter of discussing President Obama's health care plan. I don't think, an expert to speak to it. I think it's very important, and I think it's very sad that there has been this much resistance to being a country that provides full health care for our people. I think as a businessman and as a business person, I think we have to recognize that if we do not cultivate our workforce, our people, we are losing. And I think that that's a critical thing. As to healthcare locally, there's a big change in the delivery of mental health services that's going to occur in the community and throughout the state. There's going to be a shifting into a medical model, which will be tied to some extent with the new health home initiative, where medical and behavioral health programs will come together to provide a comprehensive service to people if they're willing to participate. I don't know how it's going to work out. When a system like the provision of mental health changes in a community, it's very scary for those that are particularly vulnerable. But it's well-intentioned, and hopefully it will make it available more services to more people.
Well, you know, healthcare and the lack thereof is truly such an expensive thing in our society, because people who have no health care, for the most part, are also the same people that come to food pantries, and who also, I would assume, come to family for services. And there, the true losers are the seniors and the children.
Well, certainly the last few years in the cuts in services are attacking the children and the seniors more significantly than the rest of the population. I couldn't agree with you more. And we've seen a huge proliferation in the number of children, particularly in poverty. Seniors have done better. Until recently, seniors have done better. The poverty rates among seniors has dropped. But now we're seeing a shift back as everything gets cut. And the issues are very significant. The people that use the most health care generally are not connected to the healthcare system. And so they're not getting regular checkups. They're not being treated at a time when illnesses could be either prevented or could be lessened. And so they end up at a late time in a stage of an illness going to the emergency room, which is the most costly intervention. And very high cost interventions because they weren't done in a timely manner. And so the concept, at least, is to get people to be more connected to their health care, to treat it earlier, to do more preventive services, so that we're spending money to prevent illness rather than spending money to address severe illness, which often can't be effectively addressed.
Well, you know, the thing that's happening in our pantry that I'm seeing is that when you have a person who is not eating well, the next thing that happens to them is that they're getting sick. And once they get sick, then the maintenance of that person becomes more expensive to the government. And somehow it's getting through on a certain level, because the HIPNAP people are really stressing good food. But by the same token, we have some elderly people who should be coming to your food pantry, my food pantry, your soup kitchen, whatever, and they're not. Although I have seen recently, we have had people coming into our food pantries at the Good Neighbor Food Pantry they're older and they're hungry. You know?
Yes, absolutely. The thing that strikes me as the biggest change in who's coming to the food pantries has to do with people that are working. We never saw significant numbers of people coming in asking for food who are actually working. And what it's reflecting is that the cost of living in the county is higher than what people are being paid. And so people are confronted, do I fix the car so I can continue to work? Do I pay for my child's prescription because I do not have health care for my family? Do I buy food, put food on the table? Do I pay for my rent so I have a shelter over my head? And in those circumstances, a lot of times the decision is, I'll go without food, or I'll skimp on the food, or I won't pay for the better quality food because I can no longer pay for it any longer.
Right.
And so, yes, then you see a deterioration in the quality of their health because of the quality of what they're eating. And I will share with you a wonderful initiative that came from almost nowhere. I was invited to speak at an event sponsored by a group called Mohawk Consultation, which is a spin-off, a community give back from the Smiley family, people that run Mohawk. And it was developed to address a community problem once a year. And so they invited me to speak, and they said the subject was food. And I say yes, as I said yes to you without asking what we were doing. I said, okay, and then they told me it was food. And then I got off, I said, well, no, this is strange. I said, I don't grow things. I don't cook. I eat, but I'm not a gourmet, so they must be meaning emergency food. Well, it turned out that the subject was what's the best way to get food from the growers to the people that are hungry? The most effective way, which is a phenomenal concept. And at that event, I had a chance to talk to people from the Rondout Valley Growers Association, which forms the biggest group of farms in the county. And they said, well, we would give you food, but there's no way to distribute it. And so we said, oh yeah, we'll do that. And so about 3 years ago, we started distributing food to vegetables that were donated by the Rondout Valley Growers Association to food pantries and feeding programs throughout the county where we could reach them. And in the first year, we did 29,000 pounds. In the second year, we did 59,000 pounds. And last year, we were at about 44,000 pounds when the floods hit. And once the floods hit, a lot of the farmers, and particularly 3 farms are the major contributors, the Gill Farm, the Davenports, and Saunderskill. And they were really hit badly by the floods. But we still did about 48,000 pounds of vegetables. And now we're looking to try and institutionalize this for the winter and see if we could get enough processing done that the excess of vegetables that we could be donated could be processed and frozen and then distributed in the winter, where the quality of food that you or I can distribute through the pantries is very limited because we can't afford to buy fresh vegetables very often. So that's a really nice initiative, and it speaks to how a community can step up.
That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. When you freeze the food, if you can keep it in freezers until it's distributed to the soup kitchens or to the food pantries. One of the biggest things that we are realizing at the Good Neighbor Food Pantry is that the food pantries don't really have refrigeration.
They have very limited refrigeration and even more limited freezer capacity.
Right, now.
And it's very frustrating to be able to offer something of a quality and a food nutritious and be told, well, we can't store it.
Right.
And so eventually our master vision, if you will, is that we would have 3 or 4 freezers spread around the county, and that then 3 or 4 or 5 pantries would have access to a given freezer, and they would just use it up as they needed it, unless they could store it in their local pantry. We're still a long way off from that, but
the reality is when we talk about hunger, we say, like I can remember going to a NOEP a convention and someone said, 1 child in 4 in the elementary school system in Ulster County goes home hungry on Friday, and then you hear the other thing about the seniors you hear so much about hunger. And there is so much food out there. We have such abundance if we can just channel ourselves to focus on getting the abundance and distributing it. It's amazing.
But it's even a little bit more complicated than that. And the reason I say that is because we're also facing a real epidemic of obesity.
Yes.
It's reflecting the fact that we are not eating well.
Absolutely.
And so even though a lot of people take in a lot of calories, a lot of those calories are, if anything, almost damaging. And so there are initiatives now starting to be very prominent, sponsored in part by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, to look at things like what is being dispensed out of the machines in schools.
Oh.
What is the quality of food being served at the school pen? What are we doing about? One of the issues that I'm most concerned about is the summer, because the reality is that a lot of the poorest young people in our community get most of their nutrition from this breakfast and lunch program served at the school.
Yes.
And there are we don't have very many summer meals programs at all. So that nutrition is lost at a time when they're out playing and expending the most energy. And we really need to replace those summer meal programs. Family and Queens Galley, Diane Reeder, who's a powerhouse in our community, have been talking about the possibility of expanding summer meals. We have to find places that will be available to young people. In places like Kingston, it's easier because people can get to localities. Out in Shandaken or Plattekill, there isn't no easy central place when school is not going on to distribute those meals. So it's a problem. It's not an easy solution. But we're talking about it, and I think that it's very critical. I think we have to really, as much as we have to deal with a lack of food, I think we even have a bigger issue to deal with the quality of the food, the high salt, the high sugar, the quality of the calories that we're eating.
Oh, I absolutely agree. That is a huge factor in the Good Neighbor Food Pantry, because we are allowed, the HIPNAP products, and in our particular situation, because we don't really have the refrigeration, we have almost a vegan pantry. So we feel that it's important. We send 2 vehicles for fresh produce every Wednesday morning. And then, of course, by Thursday noon, the produce is gone. And in the summertime, we lose a lot of it because of the heat.
Sure.
But I think it's so important, especially now, as you talked about how families who are working, people who are working, are coming to food pantries. They're coming to family for services. 5 years ago, it was mostly single people that came, homeless men. 25 or 30 people a week. And they were, in our instance, they were the colorful people in Woodstock. And it was such a pleasure to be around them and to serve them. And,
Sure.
and now we have people coming in that have these little children. And, this is the time when they're little toddlers. This is when they are going to form their ideas for when they are adults. It's like, do you remember how your mother got food for you when you were a child?
Well, I know that I ate vegetables every night when I was a child.
Yes.
And I wish that I could say that about the bulk of the children that we serve. There was fruit in my house. It was a regular thing. And so the diet was a fairly well-rounded diet. Maybe it was richer in meat because my father really liked meat, but than it should have been. But it was a well-rounded diet, and it was available to them. It's a great challenge to provide a well-rounded diet with the resources that our local pantries and feeding programs have.
In our pantry, because I see these little kids, they are going to remember that they could get, when it was available, that they could get apples and oranges and they could get different things. But the thing I think it's important for the future of the pantry is that this is where they're going to remember that they got their food. So that the food pantry system has really got a future going for it.
Well, it's grown. There are about 38 feeding programs and food pantries in our small county. That's a large number for such a small community. Geographically we're large, we're the size of the state of Rhode Island, but still it seems like an awful lot of pantries. And yet there's the need, and they serve different constituencies. Not that many of the pantries have the kind of availability that, say, Families does.
Oh, right, because you're open all the time.
As we're open, it's open. And so people can come in. One of the things that we've done, which I think is very significant, is we were fortunate and training was made available to us to be able to sign people up for food stamps. And it was at the same time when food stamps, when you could go on into the internet and sign up yourself. But a lot of the people that we serve don't have the resources, the experience of the system that gives them comfort level to just go in and sign up for a major benefit. So we trained a number of people, and In the first year and a half since that time, we signed up 430 families for food stamps. Well,
Can anybody walk into family and sign up for food stamps?
yes, yes. They probably will have to make an appointment. They may have to bring some material that we can help them submit. But yes, absolutely. In any one of family's offices, people can come in and say, I would like to see if I'm eligible for food stamps. And we will go through the eligibility with them. And if they're eligible, we will make an appointment, tell them what they need to bring in, and we will help sign them up for food stamps. Absolutely.
That is such an important thing. That brings money into our community.
It does. It brings about $9 for every dollar of food stamps. There's a kickback, a kick-in of more economic activity.
But it brings money from away into, it's outside dollars, which is extremely important.
And it's spent immediately locally.
Yes.
You know, this is not theoretical. This goes right into the economy.
So if I could have a wish, I would wish that everybody had food stamps. So
it's very disturbing to see the food stamp now SNAP. You know, food stamps were considered an embarrassment to people. Oh, you're on food stamps, as if it was a crime. And so a lot of people that were eligible wouldn't access that help. And we saw it in the same thing in the school lunch programs, where young people were eligible for free lunch but wouldn't take it because then their fellow people would know the stigma of it, until they got swipe cards where people don't know what it is. It could be a debit card, you know, and so they changed the name to Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP. And that's an attempt to make it more palatable for people who would be embarrassed to get help. And it's very sad to see people that have worked their whole lives and now have to come in for help with food. They're embarrassed and ashamed. And these are people that deserve the help. They paid into the system their whole lives. It wasn't their fault that their insurance company did this or their employer closed. It's just not, you know, we're being harsh. I will share with you that I ran into a friend of mine, and he was a welder and a very skilled worker. And about 2.5 years ago, his boss died and the business closed. And he hasn't been able to find a job. He said, you know, I've worked all my life. He said, and now I go in and people don't, you know, I'm too old. They're looking for a young person. They can pay much less. And he said, my self-esteem's in the toilet. And people don't understand that whole process of that what you do and carrying your own weight is something that people are proud of. And when they're forced by circumstance beyond themselves to have to seek help, we should make it as easy and acknowledging them, because they built this system that we have. It's very sad to see.
We should honor the people. Well, maybe we could, in the Good Neighbor Food Pantry, have something where we could tell people more about going over to family and getting food stamps. I know that I've put letters in the Woodstock Times, and I've had art, you know, I've shows on it, but sometimes it kind of dies down. But we've had a lot of new people come into the pantry recently.
Well,
and
I think it's worth a question. Have you thought about, you know, do you know if you're eligible? Do you need some help? I know that family could help you.
Yes.
They would certainly be willing to. You could even call up and see if you could make an appointment for them to come in.
That is a wonderful idea, and I'll tell you why. We just got our phone last
Oh, well,
week.
good for you.
So now we've got it in
Modern
the pen.
technology.
Yes, so now we can call.
Oh, good.
That's great. You know, I would like to ask you, how many, where is family? Family's all over the place. It's in Kingston, it's in Ellenville.
Family started in Woodstock, and about 2 years into it, we were already running this 24-hour hotline. And in those days, this is hard to imagine, but we're now talking about early 1970s. It was a long-distance call from Saugerties to Woodstock.
Wow.
But it wasn't a long-distance call to Kingston. Kingston was sort of the hub of the northern part of the county, and you could call from Phoenicia to Kingston, but you couldn't call from Phoenicia to Woodstock as a local call. So when the county heard that we were running this 24-hour hotline, which was at least in part focused on drug emergencies, the then Ulster County Narcotics Guidance Council approached us about would we be willing to put a tie line, actually 2 tie lines, in from Kingston that would make family toll-free county, northern part of the county. And there was a very significant discussion at that point. It was one of the very few times in the history of the agency that there was a vote. It was close. People were really on alternate sides and very heartfelt discussion. And the sides were that we didn't want to lose our values taking government money. There was a big constituency that said we can't take government money. We'll lose all our values. And then there was the people that said, we can't handle every drug emergency. We're going to get a heroin overdose on the phone every 15 minutes. What are we going to do? But on the other side, we wanted to help more people. And we had hired 2 coordinators who we paid $50 a week to work 24 hours on and 24 hours off. They had to either answer the phone or find volunteers and supervise them. And we were having trouble paying because we had no way to fundraise. We had no money. So I think it was 3 votes, we decided to take the county's money, and they put in tie lines, and we started functioning in that way. In 2 or 3 years later, the county came back to us and said, you're doing a great job. We really think you're doing work that we need done. We'd like you to be toll-free countywide. We want to put a tie line in from Kerhonkson, one from New Paltz, and that will make you toll-free countywide. And we said, okay, but we still go out in drug emergencies. We go out to help people. And it's an hour and 15 minutes from Woodstock to Ellenville. Why don't you give us a little bit more money? And we'll go down and we'll set up a cadre of people. We'll train them. They'll be responsive to the hotline. We'll send them out. They'll be local. And so I said, okay. And they gave us the money. And we went down and we trained a group in Ellenville. We trained a group in New Paltz. As we were talking before the show, totally different people came out. People, much more establishment people, the assistant superintendent of the schools, somebody high up in the prisons, the clerk of the village of Ellenville. And when they got done, they loved the training. They said, when they got done, where's our office? And we said, what are you talking about? They said, no, you don't understand. We're going to do everything that Woodstock does, but we have a few other ideas of our own. And so within 2 weeks, the churches gave them money for their phone. The library gave them an office. They were off and running. Same thing happened in New Paltz. And so we really led the decentralization of service in the county before we ever had a service in Kingston. And even to this day, we are the prime deliverers of human services in Ulster, in Woodstock, New Paltz, and Ellenville. In Kingston, we're one of a number of agencies. We certainly have an impact there. Our major office delivery is out of Kingston now. We do a lot of services out of Kingston, but we still value the fact that we're decentralized. And we think it's very critical to the delivery of service. Just look at what's going on with the gas prices. Just look at what an effort with the public transportation that we have. And they're doing the best that they can. And there's really not going to be a huge amount of money to give us subways or, or a real bus system. People are not going to be able to get to Kingston if that's the only place that service is delivered. And so in every way that we can bring service to our local community, that's what we're doing. And we sponsor a lot of things.
My experience with family has been that you do a lot of wonderful things and nobody spends an awful lot of time filling out pieces of paper, and it's a really casual, wonderful way to help people.
That's true, but our staff fills out an inordinate amount of paper to get the money to be able to be casual with people. It's really true. We do a lot of paperwork, but we de-emphasize, and one of the great strengths of family and why it's so well received by people is we don't limit people what they can come for. We don't have a requirement. We don't have stipulations. Our social services system is a gate system. You go to social services, and while people want to help you, their first approach is to see if you're eligible. We have no eligibility for help from family. You need help from family, you come in and you ask for help, and we explore with you what the problem is and what the resources are, and encourage you to make a decision as to what the best solution for you is. And having made that plan, we'll help to the greatest extent we can to get you the access you need to whatever services are available. That's our approach.
I think sometimes you don't wait for people to ask. I know that there have been 2 times in the history of the Good Neighbor Food Pantry since I've been involved when you have really made a contribution and we didn't even think to ask. 3 Christmases ago, that pantry, man, it looked like we had moved out. It was so bad. And Tamara called from family and said, I've got some food, and if you can get here, you've got it. I was there in less than 5 minutes, and our shelves were filled.
Well, I mean, what's the difference? Are your people different than,
No.
you know?
But we didn't
do
even
my people
ask.
need more food than you deserve more food? It's not
all-
that way.
it's all the same.
It's all the same. You know, that's why we were totally happy to distribute the vegetables. You know, they're not going exclusively to our programs at all. A lot of them are going to Queen's Galley because Queen's Galley is serving 100,000 meals, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner to people that otherwise wouldn't be eating.
Yeah.
So, you know, they need it. They get it, you know.
Right.
And that's the way it should be. The resources should be shared.
I agree.
You know.
And that's why we're so happy on Thursdays. We're happy to repay the generosity a teeny bit by driving over and saying, okay, can you take some tomatoes, or
Yeah,
can
sure.
you take some oranges or apples?
It would be a sin to let it go bad
Oh, no,
just
no.
because it wasn't your
Oh,
clients.
Let me tell you, if the volunteers in the Good Neighbor Food Pantry, if they thought the food was going bad, I would be fired instantly.
Speaking of sharing, could we share that bottle of water?
Yes, we can. We certainly can. There you go.
Thank you.
We wanted to talk about, we did say one thing we were going to talk about is childcare.
Oh, okay.
Can we talk about that is
Absolutely.
That's such a tragic
Let
situation.
me start
right
by
now.
saying that family, since about the late 80s, has had the role of child care council in not only Ulster but Columbia and Greene counties. It's the one area of the agency's work where we expanded beyond the formal geographic area of the county. And the Child Care Council tries to promote child care by improving the quality of care that's provided by the local daycare providers, training, financial support to improve the quality of food served, registration, responding to investigations. We sort of play a quasi governmental role while really supporting the providers. But my perspective on childcare is simply this. I cannot understand, it's an anachronism, it's a lack of responding to radical changes in society, that somehow when a child gets to be 6 years old, it's the whole community's responsibility to educate them. But when a child is 0 to 5, which we know is the highest developmental time in their lives, the most significant developmental time, it's not our responsibility. And the only explanation for that is there's a mom home. But there's no longer a mom home. Moms are working. The number of single parents is huge in our community and growing steadily. There are many people that feel marriage is an institution which is dying in our communities. But whether it is or not, even if they're 2-parent households, both of those parents now have to work to survive. So unless we're prepared to invest in childcare, improve the quality of care, we will continue to see young people flunk out of first grade. How sad. And it's because they're not socialized, because they can't sit long enough, because in the schools they have to have more rigid limits, and that child wasn't ready. So if we want to have a workforce, if we want kids to see their role as to be leadership in our society, then we have to invest. And the earlier we invest, the better the money spent will be. The more we will get out, the better the investment in our society. And the fact that we're not doing that, we've seen the quality of care decline significantly over the last 5 years. And now there are efforts to improve the care. They're implementing a Quality Stars initiative in which daycare centers will be rated and be paid more based upon the quality of the program they provide. And we didn't get the money from the feds. We came in 23rd. And the reason we came in 23rd out of the 50 states is because we didn't invest enough ourselves. So it's really important that we as a community and as a state make the statement, we believe in our children and we're prepared to invest in our future. And that's to invest in childcare.
Well, I think it's not only childcare. We have to invest in the health of that child.
Well, Family of Woodstock distributed $416,000 of reimbursement to child care programs that gave meals that were of a certain standard.
Wonderful.
And we've been doing that. It's called the Community Adult and Children's Food Program, CACFP. It's a program of the Department of Agriculture that comes through state ed, and it's really an important program. And it says to a provider, if you meet these standards, we will reimburse the cost of food. Well, that does two things. It improves the quality of food served, and it also lowers the cost of care, because in order to give good quality food, the program has to spend more. If it isn't reimbursed, it has to charge the parents more. So this is a really critical program, and the kind of thing that we can do to support child care programs around the county and around the state.
Are you aware of any backpack programs?
When you say backpack, what do you mean? You mean school supply programs?
Where they send home food with the children?
I know that there are some programs that do that. Some schools have done it. But I don't think there are really a lot of them, certainly not in our community. I'm not aware of a lot of them. I think that maybe one of the Ontiora schools did at one point in time. But I would only be concerned about the issue of kids being embarrassed to bring home food for their families.
Yes. When you talk about child care,
Yes.
family functions as a broker then. In other words, you go out and you find the families that need the child care?
We have a few functions. Any parent or any business can recommend that their employees call the Child Care Council. The number is 845-331-7080. Ask for the Child Care Council. They can seek child care in a particular area. They can get the details of what kinds of child care are available. They could get a range of fees that are charged. They can find out which child care providers have openings at this point in time. And they can also talk with a professional about what they should look at as a parent in selecting child care. Not every parent has the same values. You know, for some parents, the program has to be vegan. You know, for others, they want it to be highly educational. For a third, they want it to be very touchy-feely and that the child gets supported a lot. And, you know, some have an educational bent. So one size doesn't fit all, especially in childcare. And the parent has to really make a good choice as to what do they want? How do they want their child? What kind of provider? How effective the provider is in the various different kinds of issues that are dealt with by a child care provider. School rep is important. School preparation is important for some. For others, they really want a home-like environment. It may be that over time the environment should change and it should go from a more like home-like environment to more one that's going to be closer to school. These are a lot of different decisions, and every parent, there may be language issues. So we discuss with parents what to look for, what to ask, what's important to them. And again, a lot of it is listening. You know, is bringing the parent out to think about things that they wouldn't normally think about in terms of the selection of their child care provider.
So how does a parent tap into this service that
All they
you
have to do
offer?
is call. They can go onto our website, but I would say that the best thing that they could do is to call the Child Care Council. Again, 845-331-7080.
That's a tremendous service.
Yes, a wonderful service, very important. And then the other part of the service is that we provide training, we provide resources, we have a lending library, we have for some providers we provide intensive technical assistance to how to do a thing, or if they take on a new group, what are the, the important developmental stages of that group. It's a very well-rounded service.
So basically, I think what you're saying is that if you can tap into family, you can find information that you need in all kinds of different areas.
Yes, we're not limited to just what we do. We believed that we were going to be a referral service. Our vision was, well, we'll just tell people what's available, help them figure out what they need, help them, bring them out as to what they want, and to help them become more precise in their thinking about it by questioning, helping them to bring it out, and then say, oh, these are the services. What we didn't come to expect was that there were huge gaps in services, just huge. Emergency shelter, there was virtually none. Domestic violence, there were none. Child care, that was very limited. So where we ran into the roadblock of not having services available, if there was no other agency in the county that had taken a lead in that area, we tried to establish that. And over time, we've been very successful in creating programming. We run about 16 or 17 major programs, and they're major. I mean, they're not small things. They're like an emergency shelter for families, or a comprehensive domestic violence service, or the child care council.
Do you have domestic violence shelters?
We have a domestic violence shelter. It's a 17-bed shelter for women and children. It first opened in 1980, and at that point it was the first shelter between Yonkers and Albany. It was the first shelter in the Mid-Hudson Valley. And at that time our license capacity was 19, and we were averaging 24 women and children a night because we were it. Over time, two shelters have opened in Dutchess, one in Green, one in Orange. Orange has a safe home network, one in Columbia. So we lowered our capacity to 17 so we would have more living space, but we're still serving a lot of people.
You're still full?
Well, we're not always full, but we still have we served about 170 women and children last year. And then we run a lot of non-residential programming, domestic violence programming. And we run a batterers program we have run for probably 28 years. And the batterers program is just being used so much that we're now running 8 full-time programs a week, continuous programs, and we have a waiting list.
So that's a growing problem.
I don't know if it's growing. I think it's gaining more recognition. It's growing in the sense that the economic downturn has increased the amount of violence in the community. It's very hard for you to live when you're not earning a living, you have no place to go, your self-esteem is in the toilet, you start to bicker over money, you don't have money to buy for your children what everybody else has. These are areas that are very hard to deal with, and if you're not aligned with your partner at all times, they get into real fights and it leads to violence. And people don't have that much skill. They're not really taught that much skill as to how to negotiate, how to listen to people, how to not take personally everything that's said, how to negotiate, what the triggers are that are leading to your violence.
Do you teach classes in communication?
We have life skills training that we do. We're running an anger management program for adolescents, and a lot of it is communication. A lot of the life skills that we work on. We do job training and job readiness, and we're part of the Office of Employment and Training, Youth Employment Service. And we just did a job fair in Saugerties, and there's going to be one in Kingston, where it's really hard for young people these days to find work. A lot of the jobs that used to be available to young people are now being competed for with people that have worked for 25 years and can't find a job. And so, it's a tough time for young people. And that's a scary thing.
I think employment it's a tough time for everyone in this area because you read in the paper that, well, you know, the economy is slowly getting better, and then I look around and it's not happening in our crowd anyway. I mean, you know.
Well, one of the things that you know you have to think about in terms of Ulster County is that you know there's got to be a balance. If your jobs pay low, but your housing costs are low, it may be hard for you to live, but at least it's in balance. Our jobs pay pretty low. I think we're like the 25th lowest paying county per job, but our sheltering costs are the 9th or 10th highest. So in that unevenness, it makes it even harder. And a lot of people in our county are paying upwards of 50% of their gross income just to keep a shelter over their head. In that environment, there isn't money to fix the car, to, you know, all of those expenses that all of us have. Buy new shoes, you know, and unfortunately, as a society, people are judged by what, you can't not have a cell phone now. You don't have Air Jordans? What's wrong with you, kid? You know, there's a whole self-esteem wrapped around. I'm sure it was true in other times, but it seems to be more true with the kind of instant communication that we have now.
Well, and there seems to be, you know, a group of people that are just doing so well, and then here's this other group of people that is not doing so well. I would like to know, do you operate shelters? How about soup kitchens?
We don't run soup kitchens. We do feed all of the people in our shelters, and we did a huge number of meals because we served a huge number of people. We sheltered 518 people last year. We provided the shelter. Out of the shelters that we have a shelter for single individuals called the Darmstadt Shelter. It serves primarily people in recovery or people that are very fragile with mental health issues. Then we have a 27-bed shelter for homeless families. And on any given night, there'll be 18 children there. Very sad to see. We have the domestic violence shelter. We have a 14-bed shelter for runaway and homeless youth. And then we have 2 transitional living programs that are called Midway. And they're for homeless adolescents, older adolescents, 16 to 20, who are homeless and have no family resources. They're at a time in their lives when they think that they're ready to be totally on their own, but they have very, very limited life skills. They haven't finished their education. They don't have employable skills yet. And so the program tries to do that. They can stay in the program for up to 18 months. We're very proud of that program, but it's financially a hard program to run because there's no money for it. So we're fundraising huge amounts of money to keep our adolescent services programs open.
How important is fundraising to soup kitchens, shelters, food pantries, you know?
Well, let me put it this way. In order to not close major programs because of cuts that we've taken on every level of government, my board of directors, family's board of directors, approved a budget calling for us to fundraise an additional $150,000 this year, at a time when everybody's saying you're not going to be able to fundraise as much, because we're just not prepared to close programming that form an essential part of a safety net in this county for young people, for homeless people, for domestic violence victims. And so we're going to the community, which is what we have always historically done in crisis, and say, how much do you value these services? Are you willing to step up and help? And we're prepared to do a lot of the work. You know, we did a chocolate brunch event at Diamond Mills, which was very successful and a wonderful event. We're going to collaborate with Cornell Cooperative Extension to do a corn festival at the fairgrounds in New Paltz. We're going to do a major bicycle event called the Grand Fondo, where the whole community goes out and rides. And, you know, we're prepared to put more effort into our fundraising because the effort to bring these programs back up if they are forced to close is an effort that I don't think can be accomplished in this environment. So we would rather fight to keep them open than try to get them reopened.
What are the trends now? Are the trends toward more shelters? Are the trends toward
Well, we don't, it's
What
not
are the
a...
coming needs?
It's disturbing to see how many families are in motels now. But the answer is not more emergency shelter beds. The answer is more housing, affordable housing of a decent quality. And we're not being successful. I personally chair the housing consortium in the county. It's a work that I've done for a really long time. It's probably the only area of my public work that I feel I haven't really been successful in. It's terrific, and I know that there are people that are frustrated that we're building 53 units of affordable housing in Woodstock. We tried to start to do that in 1988. So if in 1988 till the present we were unsuccessful, we did 21 units at next to the post office, and boy was there a fight over that. 21 units was going to change the character of Woodstock. And excuse me, 25 years later, are those people locals now? Do they get to be counted as locals? I mean, God, are we so special in Woodstock that we can't let anybody else in? Perish the thought. And I am sensitive to the people that live around it and feel that the quality of their life is going to be changed by some traffic. But we need housing. We need people to be able to live. And the statement that restricting people from coming because it'll increase the number of school kids and therefore the taxes is so misguided, it's incredible. Because Antioch is projected to lose 35% of its school kids. Then the geographic area of Antioch is not going to change. So that means that if you lose a third of your kids, the cost of picking up the other 2/3 just increased by a half. Nothing changed except we lost the state income for that child. And New York City's buying up every piece of property it can to prevent any new family housing. So Onteora is in a terrible place. They cannot succeed because then they cannot grow. They're losing kids. Their geographic area isn't changing. There's no easy way for them. And we need kids. 9 out of the 10 school districts in the county are losing children. Where is our workforce going to be? Who's going to take care of all the seniors that we have? Doesn't it feel like people are only concerned with themselves? I don't want any more. I don't want any housing near me. Gee, that's really too bad. They didn't have that attitude when you moved here.
That's true.
Oh, now that I'm here, people that live here for 3 years talk as if they own the community. Well, yes, you do, as part of everybody else. In 1988, we had a housing task force appointed by the town of Woodstock. We opened ourselves up. Anybody could come and talk. 9 families came one afternoon. They all said the same thing. I'm 28. I have kids now. I cannot afford to find a job where I can own a house. I'm not going to pay rent forever. I'll move away. 7 out of the 9 had street names named after their families. They're gone now. So, there has to be a balance. And there isn't a balance. The pendulum swings so far one way or the other. It should stay close to the middle. And everybody deserves some help.
I agree with that, certainly. What are the futures of you just touched on something that's very, very close to my heart. These young families here, the rent is so high, food is expensive, gas is totally outrageous.
And you cannot have a car here.
Jobs are they're not.
Boy, you wouldn't be a good salesman for this area.
I know. And then if you start talking about families, and as a woman, I ask myself, what has happened to the concept of family planning? It's like contraception has become a dirty word. So what are we to do?
Well, I don't think that anybody is prepared to give up women's participation in the labor force. And if women can't plan for their families, they can't advance in the labor force. And it's, it feels like an attack on women. It also is very misguided. It may be that a lot of people feel that the abortion issue is a religious issue. is a legal issue. But there are very few people that feel that the contraception is a legal issue. And yet it's being fought, it's being made harder, as if as if our society should enforce morality through its laws, and it never can do that. We should be promoting the availability of family planning and contraception. Planned Parenthood, because it has done abortions, has been beaten, and it shouldn't have been. It tries to be and is a good agency, providing a lot of services in our community. And it's being attacked on a religious basis, and I believe it's in violation of the separation of church and state.
I don't see it as religious. It's in that genre. It's really, it's control. It's taking a whole group of people and beating them down. It's what it's doing. It's like controlling women. It's controlling physicians. I would never be a physician in today's market.
Yes, it's tough.
You've got the government sitting there in this room with you. It's, the 500-pound parrot. Are we out of time? We are out of time. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
You are the most wonderful guest.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
Yes. No, it's fabulous. You have offered so many opportunities for our listening audience to think.
Well, I would like to extend one more opportunity to come out and join family. We do training, we need volunteers, we need people with energy. We will give you the opportunity to help improve your community. Call any family office.
Great. That's a wonderful thing. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been fabulous.
Well, thank you.
Are you going to have any kind of a volunteer?